I remember some time ago, I used to often think about how easy it would be to become some kind of tyrant, to manipulate circumstances, to manipulate people in order to, in some way, extract things from them, things that I desired, were I to have such desires. And that was, incidentally, one of the barriers that I recognized, the barrier between me, in fact, executing such a, reproachable thing, really. And I say reproachable because second most important barrier was that there's an element of empathy prohibiting me from doing such things, and yet still, somewhat paradoxically, there was in me, I identified this sadistic element, some part of me that could, it's kind of hard to explain, but I guess this is what I'm trying to do here. I could see the vulnerabilities in people. I could see how just defenseless they really were, even behind the personas that they put up, the masks that they wore. I could see deeper into them, the overall fragility that they were really just little children, lost little children, completely confused, disorientated, just looking for someone to latch onto, some kind of anchor, some kind of sense of meaning, love, connection. And I could see how easy it would be to just target such and utterly crush such. And that part of myself that was able to identify all of this, were I to give free rein to it, it seems that there would be perhaps an element of, sadistic pleasure that would be derived from such. Some part of me, someone, I guess, right? It's something that's simultaneously me and not me. But that's sort of, I guess, in a large part is what all of us are. These multiplicity of selves some of which we are conscious of and some of which we're unconscious of, and some which we actively suppress consciousness of. I suppose partially in myself, I suppress consciousness of this part of myself, but I know it's even though it's somehow distant from the more dominant ego that I operate from. And I can, well, make a reasonable enough case, I suppose, for determining where such came from, what its roots are based in, and that's about how I was treated as a child, or just in my past, but specifically childhood, which is of course when we're most impressionable to these things, when we're most malleable and impacted by experiences as we're still piecing together a kind of neural map of the world, what things mean and how we ought to interact with them and who we are in relation to such. So all the experiences that occur within those times when the brain is most plastic and impressionable are the ones that leave the longest and most lasting impact, the ones that really shape and define who we are and how we see the world. And it's really not too much of a stretch for me to see how the way that I see the world and people now is all very much tethered to, inextricably, to how people treated me when I was a child and how the world was for me as a child. And, well, I guess I'll go into that a little. Long story short, I was treated very badly by almost everyone that I encountered. Children, of course, my peers, right? Just, it's very common in society to think of children as being innocent and good, right? I've even been guilty of suggesting such myself in some of these recordings, but in some elements they are, but in other ways they're worse than adults, in the sense that they lack the filters that adults do. It's not that they have any less of a predilection for vileness than, to be clear, the two are much the same in the propensity for vileness, but adults have the ability to filter such, to present these personas and so on that enable society to function in a more cohesive way. But children don't possess such, and so there's no, whatever vileness is latent within them that is given free rein. And oh boy, you can bet they really identify, I guess, the runts, right? The runts of the litter, or the omegas, or what have you. They really hone in upon such people, such beings with this absolute mercilessness. And yeah, I mean, I suppose going on the basis of how I was treated, can only conclude that I was, or still am, I suppose, just one of those people, one of those beings. I am not of the pack, I'm not of the herd. And yeah, it seemed to be very important that that was made viscerally known to me, made viscerally clear wherever I went. And so much so was this the case, I guess, that I was one of these omega creatures, that even so-called authority figures, adults, right, who you would think, right, in a just world to be more impartial, I guess, reasonable, right, they would step in and prevent such vileness from occurring, to stand up for the more so innocent party. But I really can't recall many instances wherein that actually happened. Very often the adults, the so-called authority figures, would they would join in some way. They certainly wouldn't condemn the actions of the other children involved that were tormenting me in some way. And maybe even worse was that in some cases, where children weren't even involved, it would just be, an authority figure, an adult. People unrelated to me, by the way. This isn't people that were in my family or even family friends, although that also did occur. Just, adult authority figures unrelated to me would also just make it clear to me that I was this omega creature, right? That I was not of the pack, that I wasn't welcome within whatever little shitty little hive mind they had going on. I mean, it's kind of absurd when I look back on it, that just to try and put myself in their shoes, right? Say, being an adult and just going out of my way to be incredibly hostile and patronizing to someone, a child, basically, someone, decades younger than me. It just, like, these are some very, now that I look back on it, of course I was unable to see this at the time. All I was able to see, to experience, was the I don't know, pain, confusion, right? That feeling of being ostracized and not really knowing why. And having that, of course, shape my impressionable brain and lead me to being the person that I am now. But, but in any case, looking back at it, I see that these people, these adults that did this, acted in this way towards me. They were very sick people. Very sick. There's something very wrong with their psychology for them to be acting in such a way. And I mean, it's interesting because oftentimes these people would be teachers, right? And then they would be very popular teachers, actually. I mean, I would be in classes, say, where, the teachers were just sort of renowned. They were notorious for just being these easygoing, sort of, just really fun, like, good teachers that everyone admired and looked forward to being taught by. And I would have it in the classes where, the teacher would spend the whole lesson just engaging in this back and forth banter with the class and really getting along well with them and so on. And I wouldn't be involved in this, but I would sort of be observing it, right? I'd sort of be vicariously enjoying the sort of proceedings, right? Seeing all the other people in the class laughing with the teacher laughing and so on. But then the teacher or whatever would engage with me directly, and the whole demeanor would change, and I would be subjected to something very different than, as far as I could tell, everyone else in the class was being subjected to. I wasn't permitted to engage in this banter, this, whatever was occurring there. And, thinking about this stuff, I've sort of, I don't know, speculated that a lot of these teachers were probably quite narcissistic in some ways, right? And they were getting their validation and supply from these students that were just fawning over them, simping over them, and so on. But seeing as I was not actively participating in such, I was seen as, in some way, threatening that. And, as such, suffer the consequences of such, of causing inadvertently, unbeknownst to me, some kind of narcissistic injury. But it's just speculation. But nonetheless, all of this, and particularly this latter example, has really been a great education to me about how people are, what people really are. Seeing how conditional everything is. Seeing the machinations that occur beneath the surface. What happens to one who doesn't play the game, even if, the lack of them playing is due to them being unable to play the game. They never had a choice in being able to play, and nonetheless, there's no mercy. There's no mercy. And try as I might, having experienced what I've experienced and having seen what I've seen of people, it's very difficult for me to not to not hate people. It's left a lasting mark on me. It's so deeply rooted in my psychology. I can, I suppose, endeavor to consciously supersede that, but always, there's within me this little boy, this child, so full of pain and some sort of guardian watching over that child, full of hate and rage for every single fucking person I see. Every fucking person I see. This guardian won't let it go because it was so unjust. And there's nothing, even today, years later, when by and large people don't treat me in that way. For whatever reason, I suppose I managed to, on some level, figure out what the specific things were that were making me a target and learn to conceal them when in company, to present as one of them, as a human and not an omega creature or whatever the fuck it was they perceive me to be as. But this guardian of this injured little child who never did anything to deserve any of that treatment, and yeah, I'm really being honest about that. I'm not trying to manipulate things here for pity or whatever. It really was like that, but you'll just have to take my word for it. That guardian recognizes still that even today, these people who around me that I interact with, just anyone really who would not treat me like that and treat me as if I were an equal, say, the guardian recognizes that most probably the only reason that is the case is because I'm not presenting as I once was, as the omega creature. And I mean, perhaps the case could be made that I very much still am, and people just aren't treating me that way because, as I mentioned a little while back, adults have filters. Not of course, the adults when I was a child, but nonetheless, a lot of adults have filters, right? And I suppose even these adults that didn't have filters, these teachers, right, from my past, they probably too had filters. They just felt that they could get away with acting in such a way to a child. They probably wouldn't do that with an adult. Because, yeah, they're weak. They're weak people. Cowards, basically. They have to be, right, to act that way to a child. It's pathetic, really. I see that now. But unfortunately I couldn't as a child. And, yeah, so the damage is done, right? Sorry, I'm speaking in a very tangential way. Yeah, so the guardian sees it today, right? The people that I interact with, other adults and so on, they're just the same kind of people. They're just the same. And even if they don't have that vileness within them, and it's not just being prohibited by filters for the sake of social cohesion, for self-preservation too, I guess, in a way, right? Even if they are good people, the Guardian won't allow that. And I can try and, as I already said, consciously supersede that, but it's incredibly difficult because the Guardian is so deeply embedded within me. It's a more deeper, complete part of who I am, of what I am. And, yeah, it doesn't like people at all. It fucking hates them. It is only able to perceive them as a threat, as these vile things capable of vile things. Vile things that are done for no real reason whatsoever, just out of malice. And it sees how, it sees how such things can be brought forth from even supposedly good people. That it's just a matter of pushing the right buttons. And then all of a sudden, there's this incredibly unpleasant, vile thing before you, capable of absolutely horrific things. And then, at the snap of fingers, right, it just goes back to being this apparently placid thing, acting all docile and civilized in its nice clothes, going to its nice little cozy job and putting on slippers and watching a bit of television. My experiences from my childhood have sort of prohibited me from seeing the world in a more naive way, seeing people in a more naive way. I was already, of course, outcast by default, but how I was interacted with and treated as a result of such pushed me further out. It made me more and more of an outsider, more outcast, until, well, I suppose with every step back, every increment further I was pushed away, I gained a greater vantage point upon human psychology and the dark side of it, at least, right?